Good afternoon. I'm Tom Putnam, Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. On behalf of Tom McNaught, Executive Director of the Kennedy Library Foundation, all of my library and foundation colleagues, and members of our Foundation Board of Directors, many of whom are here with us tonight, I thank you all for joining us. Let me begin by acknowledging the generous underwriters of Kennedy Library Forums, including lead sponsor Bank of America, represented here tonight by Ann Finucane, Boston Capital, represented by Jack Manning, the Boston Foundation, represented by Paul Grogan, the Lowell Institute, Raytheon, and our media partners, the Boston Globe, NECN, and WBUR. I should note that our forums are rebroadcast on WBUR on Sunday evenings at 8 o'clock, and we're grateful to the station for lending us our moderator for this session, Bob Oakes. For me, Mr. Oakes is a constant weekday companion as I wake, have breakfast, drop my kids at school, and drive to work. And day in and day out, he is much more polite and sunnier than my two teenagers are at that hour of the morning. A graduate of Charlton High, Mount Wachusett Community College, and UMass Amherst, Bob Oakes' award-winning reporting includes an eyewitness account of the Challenger disaster, dodging sniper fire in Kosovo, and getting kicked off of 2 presidential campaign buses in New Hampshire because of his tough questioning of John McCain and 4 years later, John Edwards. Don't worry, Governor, he's promised to be on his best behavior tonight. Our purpose today is to hear from Governor Deval Patrick about his life as told through his inspiring new memoir, and so I'm hesitant to say too much in my introduction. Before I share a couple of anecdotes, let me remind everyone that the book is on sale in our bookstore, and there will be a book signing following today's forums, and we'll be taking written questions from the audience, so please use the index cards provided to you. Like others who have followed and supported Governor Patrick's career, I thought I was generally well acquainted with his life story through his various campaigns and confirmation hearings. But who knew that he was born in his grandmother's bed and delivered by his grandmother and uncle, who, after a safe delivery, wrapped him in a blanket and placed him in a warm oven with the door open until the doctor arrived. And that on every Thanksgiving thereafter, his grandmother would remind him of that fact as she dressed the holiday turkey in the very same roasting pan that held him as a newborn. These are facts that the governor failed to mention in his campaign brochures. Now, I did hear the governor reference his grandmother once in a speech at the convocation of Keith Motley, who is here with us tonight, to be Chancellor of UMass Boston. The governor relayed to Chancellor Motley that at similar momentous times in his life, when his grandmother was too proud for words, she had one special comment to share that summed up her emotions. Governor? And as a boy, Deval Patrick won Father of the Year essay contest, and his subject was his grandmother. And whether you agree with Deval's Patricks or not, and we tend, Governor, for some odd reasons to attract audience that are likely to be in your camp, in reading his new book, A Reason to Believe, Lessons from an Improbable Life, it is hard not to brim with pride at his accomplishments and be thankful to live in a country that provides opportunities for many to pursue their dreams. Just last week, many of us were reminded of why Deval Patrick is so successful. Speaking at the groundbreaking of our newest neighbor, the Edward M. Kennedy Institute, among a host of dignitaries, the governor's remarks stood out for 2 reasons. First, they were the briefest. I've already surpassed their length, and I'm doing my best here to get off stage, but they were also among the most profound. In keeping with the theme of his new book, the governor suggested that what saddens him most about our current political culture is that in demonizing government and glorifying greed, we are sapping the country of its optimism. A fitting commentary in this institution as we prepare to mark next month the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's challenge to put a man on the moon, a government-led effort that summoned our spirit, maximized our talent, and inspired the world. And we thank you, Governor, for doing the same, for your improbable life the ideals you personify, and the policies you pursue, you give us all, once again, a reason to believe. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Bob Oakes and Governor Deval Patrick.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. You want me to come up there? Thank you. So do I kick it off then?
Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, Tom, thank you so much for the warm introduction, and thank you all to the library and to the board and all of the guests who've come out tonight. Thank you, Bob, for, at least so far, for convening. I just wanted to say a word or two at the outset. I have it's a sort of a surreal experience. I was saying to Tom, this new experience for me of writing and now promoting a book. As a sitting governor, the presumption seems to be that a book is a prelude to a coming campaign or to settle political scores. Let me just tell you, that's not what this book is. I'm not running for anything. And in terms of political scores, I tend to like to settle them in real time and not in print. This book really is about hopefulness and idealism. And I am a very hopeful person, an unrepentant idealist, and I've come to appreciate these qualities as strengths, really. And the book, as much as anything, is a gesture of gratitude to the people, some known, some totally anonymous, who have given me that hopefulness and idealism. The teachers who've given me a reason to believe in the power of education and a brighter future. The family members, extended and immediate, who have given me a reason to believe in the power of kindness. The voters, who've given me a reason to believe in the politics of conviction. There was someone recently who described the book, a friend of mine, as a love story. And for me, that was the greatest compliment that could have been paid, because there is a lot of love that I am trying to get across in this book to those folks who took a minute, mostly knowingly, some completely randomly, to pass on a sense of the possible, and to remind us all through the book that each of us have the opportunity to do that for someone else. And so in that spirit, let's have a conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, let me say, first of all, that I thoroughly enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
And although I'm not a book hawk, if you haven't purchased the book, I would suggest that you give it some consideration, or at least pick it up from your local library.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
And what my idea tonight is, we've chatted quite a lot over the years, and there have been a lot of tough questions, and there may be a few tonight, but what I hope to do tonight is learn more about you through the book, and inform you folks about this guy who's been so present in all our lives now for so many years. So let's start this way.
Okay.
I remember a few years back, over a year before your first election, someone from inside WBUR came to me and said, "There's this guy named Deval Patrick." And I think I said, "Who?"
I got that a lot.
Yeah. And they said Deval Patrick is someone who'd like to come to Morning Edition and be interviewed, because on the show he's essentially going to announce that he's running for governor. He's going to announce his candidacy on your program. And we thought about it for a little while, and we agreed to the interview. And we did know who you were, because your name was being tossed about, but frankly, as a relatively unknown who was getting into the contest. But like a lot of other people, I don't think we thought you had really a ghost of a chance. Then we talked on the radio, and during our conversation, there was a little crowd listening in the control room and outside the studio, and you wowed just about everybody in terms of understanding Massachusetts, in terms of the compassion that you expressed, in terms of the hope for the future. And we all said later, he does have a ghost of a chance. Did you, at that moment, actually believe you could win? Or at that moment, were you just trying to influence the debate?
A year out?
A year More than a year out.
I thought we could win. I thought that more to the point, I thought we would win, but I didn't leave anything to chance, and I didn't take anyone for granted. What we were offering and what I've tried to offer consistently is authenticity. This notion that we ought to have candidates who run willing to lose, meaning that we put out there exactly what we think, what we're worried about, what we're trying to work on. We talk to the voters as adults, and we listen to the voters and engage, because we have such a it's such a fractured political climate that we live in, that the world's around us right now, and it's left so many people feeling as if government can't help them help themselves, can't function. In
the book, you write that your life's mate, Diane, wasn't too sure that you had a chance. In fact, I think she thought you had little chance and that you should run for something less ambitious, like Congress. What was driving you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the governor's role rather than Congress, because though I respect the work of Congress, it's the executive role that I like, and I think is a more comfortable or natural fit for my aptitude and interest. I like setting the agenda. And I think you get to do that more in the executive role than you do in a legislative role. And I wanted the agenda in Massachusetts to be ambitious. We've talked about this before, Bob. I wanted us to be about generational responsibility, those handful of big, hard issues that if we are willing to face them and face them courageously and constructively, we actually do have a chance to leave a better Commonwealth than that which we found. So that, but I had no illusions about how difficult it would be, and I also know that there is a, you particularly in our political scene here, which is a very closed and inward-looking political scene, or at least had been, as I experienced it, and I think an awful lot of people did, that I was going to get the raised eyebrows and skepticism and grudging courtesy, but only grudging from a lot of folks who were the insiders. But I think I felt there were a lot of other voters who felt like me, who wanted something bigger, who wanted to be challenged, to be thinking bigger about the prospects of the Commonwealth, and wanted to be invited at the grassroots into a sense of their own political and civic future. And that's what we did. And as my grandmother would say, look at us now.
Let me come out of politics here and talk about you a little bit in this way. In the title of the book, you chose to use the word improbable. I always notice a person's eyes. And when I look at your eyes, I see someone who's totally aware. I see, right from the beginning, a compassion and a desire to, in my opinion, a desire to help someone who maybe needs a little help. I think I remember saying to myself at the end of that first interview on that day, these are qualities that I saw in those eyes. But I'm wondering, when you stand in front of the mirror at the start of each day, and you're looking into your own eyes, are you saying to yourself, this has been improbable, am I lucky? Or are you saying to yourself, this has been improbable, I made my own luck?
What a great question. I think probably the answer is somewhere in between. It has been improbable. I think of it, I think of every day as a blessing, even the crummy days. And I'm sure you're going to get to those in the list. It's an honor to serve and a blessing to serve, and a lot of responsibility that goes with it. And I think I'm a better governor today than I was yesterday, and tomorrow I hope to be a better governor than I am today. I think that There are times when I'm looking in the mirror, particularly with some of the really painful decisions we've had to make in the last couple of years, where I think to myself, are we able to do all of the good I hoped we would be able to do, and are we in fact having to do some harm because there just aren't the resources or in some cases not the political support to get things done that I'd like to get done. I'll give you one example that's been weighing on my mind. I think I see a number of supporters, folks who worked on the campaign, who've probably thought about this, the whole question of youth violence. First of all, I struggle with the question whether that is supposed to be the governor's role or a mayor's role or a local government kind of role, because it's inherently a local kind of question. But I also know that there are different expectations for me as governor that my predecessor and other predecessors simply didn't have. And the more I think about it, the more I'm struck, or at least asking myself the question whether there is a strategy to solve the question of youth violence. There are a lot of good things happening, a lot of good people doing good things. But whether there is a comprehensive strategy with some measurable results that we are tracking. And so we put this on the agenda for the second term, completely acknowledging that question, whether we have a strategy. But I can tell you, of all the things I anticipated in the job, I never could have imagined what it would be like to console a mother over the shooting death of a 14-year-old son. You can't prepare for that. And I've had to do it more than once. So I don't always have the, I'm lucky or I made my own luck kind of look in the eye. I always have the I'm blessed to have this experience. But the weight of it is also something I take it very seriously. I take it very, very seriously.
That first campaign was all about change and hope, words delivered in a very positive way. But as you say, that a lot of the change since then in Massachusetts has been anything but a plus. Unemployment up, mortgage foreclosures, cuts in state programs across the board, to human services, cities and towns, higher education. Are you worried you might finish out as a governor who managed through a fiscal and economic crisis and who could not live up to his original agenda to lift up government and along with it as many people as possible?
Well, let me see. 98+% of our residents have health insurance. No other state in America can come close to that. 99.8% of our children, our students outperform their counterparts in every other state in America and have for each of the last 5 years. We are number one in veteran services and clean energy initiatives and energy efficiency. We're growing jobs faster than 40 or 45 other states. Our bond rating has stayed strong through this downturn, unlike a lot of other states, and we are the only state that's had an upgrade anywhere in the country since 2007. We've signed now 4 budgets that were responsible, balanced, and on time. We've got a life sciences cluster now, which is the envy of the world, and a clean energy cluster, which is becoming the envy of the nation. No, I haven't accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. I've got 4 more years, Bob, so I'm not done. But I think that part of what we have been about, and I haven't gotten into the questions of the changes we've made in education, in transportation, in the pension system, on the ethics rules, a host of legislative accomplishments that you and others have reported were decades in the making and hadn't been accomplished till now. So I'm really proud of our record, but I don't rest on my record. I am impatient. I've got a lot more I want to do, and there's more to do, I think, in repairing the kind of spirit of the Commonwealth and of the people of the Commonwealth. People are scared. They've been this downturn. You know this. You remember when we talked about your trip? Remember when you drove out Route 9?
Right.
And remember you talked about where? Do you remember that conversation?
Oh,
I know you
sure.
remember the visit that you had there.
Oh, sure. For those of you who heard it, Route 9 was a series that we did last fall on WBUR where we took Morning Edition, and for 5 mornings in a row we broadcast from 5 different communities, straight out Route 9, starting in Framingham and ending in Pittsfield.
Right.
And Ware was the middle stop. Right. And I specifically chose Ware because it was the most economically depressed place on the route, and a place where people wanted to be better off, but they didn't know what to do.
Right, right. And I brought it up because Ware isn't the only place like Ware in the Commonwealth. There's a quality about this downturn which has so rattled people economically, financially, in their home savings, in their home value, their savings, but also in their confidence in themselves, in the future of their Commonwealth and the country. And of course, as someone who grew up the way I did, I have known the experience that poor people have experienced for a long time. The difference today is that the middle class is a paycheck away from being poor, and they are really anxious about it. They're asking themselves, is this still a place, this America, where we can restore ourselves and improve our position for ourselves and our families? I think we can, but I don't think that's about just waiting around for it to happen. I think that is about doing some things, and that's why we've made the choices we have, and that's why we lead the nation in so many areas.
Let me come back to the book for a minute. I want to get to your young life in just a second, but let me ask you this question first. Right in the preface of the book, you write about a story in your life when you were a kid in Chicago. You got on a bus, you realized you didn't have money to make the bus fare, and instead of being scolded by the driver, which was what you expected, he said, "It's okay, pass it on." You've said that left a lasting impression, which of course it obviously did, that you should do for others what he had done for you. Step outside the political world and tell us an instance important in your own mind, an episode in which you paid that bus driver back by passing it on.
We have, I write in the book about, the number of young people who over the years have ended up being householders of ours and of Diane and mine, and really members of our extended family. One young man who was trying to become a dancer and had studied with the Boston Ballet, and we were living in New York, and he had an opportunity to study with the School of American Ballet, and his mother wanted a place for him to live at 15 years old, and we had just been married, Diane and I, and I was away on some trip in the South with the Legal Defense Fund, and she called and Diane said, my son needs a place for the summer, and Diane said, well, okay, fine. And he showed up a couple of weeks later with a box of Cheerios and a little bit of bag, and stayed for 2 years. There have been ABC students at Milton who, they had then, I think they still do, a host family program, so that there is some family in the neighborhood who invite you over every once in a while for a hot meal and just a break from campus. And there was a young man named Doug Chavez who came to Milton as an ABC student at 14 from the South Bronx. He was as clueless in his time as I was in mine when I first came, and we asked him for dinner, and he stayed for the rest of his life. He is now in his mid-30s and lived with us for a time. His brother lived with us for a time. He graduated from Penn and then was working in New York. And when I ran for governor the first time, he and his buddies from his class quit their jobs, moved back in with us, and worked on the campaign for 2 years. There are other examples. In some respects, more than poor Diane would like for me to recount, because it takes all of us, right? My kids have had to share us with other young people. But as I said, part of the point of the book is to remind us all of us have this in our capacity. It's not always the grand gesture. It's not even about necessarily opening your home to someone, but it is about opening your heart to other people. The simple corrections that I got from adults about how to behave, how to understand, or as I write in the book, how to crack the code. Those things are much more impactful than I think sometimes people realize. But if we're conscious of them, then maybe we'll do more of this. And as we do more of this, maybe we make a better world.
Okay, let's go. Let's go all the way back.
All the way back.
Oh, well.
We already did the turkey pan.
Do you still have that pan? We save
bronze
everything.
now.
We save everything in our family. Do you still have the turkey pan?
No, I don't think we have the turkey pan.
Not an easy home life as a young boy. Jazz musician father, left the family when you were 4. Mm-hmm. You and your mom and your sister Rhonda went to live with your grandparents, where Graham, your grandmother, would buy 1 can of frozen orange juice a week, which in a way has led you to, at times, as you explain in the book, become a bit now of an OJ hoarder. Why don't you tell us that?
Well, my grandfather was the breadwinner in our family, and he had an incredible work ethic, just an extraordinary. He was also the most dignified man I've really ever known. And my grandmother kept very different economies in our home. So there was one shelf in the refrigerator for her stuff, and for her and my grandfather's stuff, and another shelf in the refrigerator for my mother to fill with stuff for us. And we got together, all those household economics came together on holidays and on Sunday morning for the big breakfast, which was the bribe for going to church, as I write about in the book. But my grandmother would get this one little can of frozen orange juice concentrate, and make enough orange juice for my grandfather to have a glass before he went to work every day, and he worked just about every day. And it was off limits to the kids, off limits, and too expensive for my mother to buy. So you have to imagine what it's like for an 8-year-old to come in from playing outside in a hot summer and open the refrigerator, and there is that juice calling to you. The little beads of sweat on the side. And you'd think, well, just a sip, no one will notice. And if you could keep it to just a sip, you might be able to get away with it. But a sip turned into a gulp or something, and man, she'd let you have it. Now, for the longest time, Diane didn't understand why I would come back from the grocery store with gallons of orange juice. I don't even drink orange juice anymore. I don't think there's ever a day when I go to the grocery store when I don't get more orange juice, but that's what that comes from. So anybody who's looking for orange juice, come on by. We've got plenty.
The Florida orange juice growers love you. Yeah. 1 bedroom for the 3 of you, bunk beds, which meant as you got older, one of you took turns sleeping on the floor on newspapers, a thin blanket, and a sheet. But you write that we always had what we had was always orderly, even if our lives were not, as if making hospital corners on the beds would keep economic chaos at bay. What was the difficult part about trying to make sense in a boy's head of what life was like at that moment?
Well, I'm going to take your question, Bob, to mean what is it like today to make sense of it? Because when you're in the middle of it, that's your reality, right? We didn't think of ourselves as quite as messed up as I came to appreciate. I mean, there were certainly challenges, but even the question of poverty, I write in the book, and I've talked about this publicly, my grandmother forbid us from describing ourselves as poor. She said, we're broke. Because broke is temporary, right? Her whole point was, and it's a lesson repeated by teachers and others, you have to imagine where you want to be. She didn't describe it this way, but this is my takeaway today. We had to visualize this middle-class life that she aspired to for herself and for us. and not ever feel. I mean, I can't remember anyone in our family telling me I couldn't go to college. No one in my family had ever been to college, or close to one. When I got into the college I wanted to get into, and I was a student at Milton Academy, I called home. I got my grandmother on the phone. I said, "Grandma, I'm going to college next year. I'm going to Harvard." And she was all excited, and she carried on and all that. And then she paused, and she said, "Now, where is that anyway?" But I think she actually understood something about that better than I did. What she was excited about was not the prestige. It was the opportunity. It was the chance. And that's what we got in that household. I miss my father because he wasn't around. It wasn't that unusual in that neighborhood in those days for fathers not to be around. But I was blessed to have lots of surrogate fathers in the course of a life. And when I think about Bob, the trajectory from the South Side of Chicago to some of the experiences I've been able to have, the difference in my upbringing from our daughters Sarah and Catherine's upbringing. There's one story I might tell you about that, which I write about in the book. That's the part that I think is improbable and yet uniquely American. You know, I've told some of you here this story before, and I know I've talked about it publicly. When our daughter Catherine graduated from high school, I was sitting there thinking about the difference between her journey to that point and mine to that point, 30 years before. And you talked about, and I think many people here know about my own upbringing. So there we were, my sister and mother and I sharing this one room. Catherine's always had her own bedroom, most of that time in our house in Milton, which was in the neighborhood where I used to deliver newspapers as a student at Milton Academy. She had, by the time she got to college, traveled on 4 continents. She knew how to use and pronounce a concierge. And she had shaken hands in the White House with the President of the United States. When she was 5 years old, her homework assignment in kindergarten was to come home and describe, they were working on the changes in the seasons, and her assignment was to describe the 4 seasons to Mom and Dad. And so she came home and began to describe her several visits to the 4 Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. She said, "First you drive up and the doorman takes your car." And she was 5 years old, right? But the point is, one generation, and the circumstances of our lives, my family's life, were completely transformed. And while that story doesn't get told as often as we'd like in this country, it gets told more often in this country than any other place on earth. That is an American story. And I'm sorry to go on, but to me, the reason to pay attention to public policy today is because the American story is up for grabs. And we ought to be willing to fight for that.
I want to ask another question about you as a young boy, because I'm trying to get at episodes in your early life that shaped you. And got you to this point. You said in those early years you were mostly a loner. You would play in the dirt with toy soldiers, creating imaginary battles, vanquishing enemies, and riding to the rescue. And I wonder if in some ways that's how you envisioned your life as an adult, being able to ride to the rescue.
Wow. I feel like I should be lying down now.
Plenty of floor.
Anybody here remember Roy Rogers? Okay. Happy Trails, right? So I never missed an episode of Roy Rogers. And when I write about riding to the rescue, that was my frame. But I've certainly been rescued more than once, and I think I have helped rescue others from time from time to time, you know, if we're not here to try to help somebody else to do something to leave it better for those who come behind us, what are we here for? What are we here for?
Let me ask about Milton Academy. You applied because one of your teachers, Mrs. Weissenberg, am I pronouncing that correctly, saw great promise in you, but you were apprehensive.
Well, I mean, I had no frame of reference for Milton Academy. In fact, I'm not sure I knew it was not a military academy until I got there. You know, the term academy seemed slightly military. We knew what the choices were at home in those days. In the 8th grade, you had three in Chicago in 1969, 1970. You had three choices. You could choose the vocational school, of which there were a number in the city. They taught things I now wish I knew, you know, like auto mechanics and tailoring and things like that. But they weren't college preparatory then. And I really wanted to go to college, and no one was discouraging me. In fact, my grandparents and mother were encouraging that. I wanted, in the worst way, to be an architect. I think I've told you before, I still want to be an architect. And so I thought of technical schools in the city, and there were two. One on the north side, one on the south side. The one on the north side was famous, you know, beautifully equipped. The one on the south side was a mess. And I was graduating first in my class, but the north side school wouldn't take any south side students. They've been sued over that, I think, since, but that was the rule at the time. And the south side technical school was just not very strong. And that left the general high school in the school district, which was DuSable High School. The general high school was where, as I write in the book, our 8th grade classes were. And so I knew what that environment was like. It was we'd had the Woodlawn riots come through the neighborhood in the previous summer or two. There was no glass left in any of the windows in our school. It was all plywood or plexiglass. There was a police officer at every intersection in the school. There were two buildings, so if you walked between the buildings, between classes, you know, between the periods, with a pass, you had to slide the pass under the door. And then the police would loosen the bicycle chains they kept on the doors because there was so much gang activity. They were trying to keep trouble at bay. And there were, I mean, the school was just, there was a certain amount of chaos in the place. It was a 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Weissenberg, who told us about a program called A Better Chance. ABC. ABC's mission was to recruit kids, as the euphemism of the day went, from non-traditional prep school backgrounds. I definitely qualified for that. And you applied through ABC, and in those days, ABC placed you. So you didn't know what school you might end up at. You took the exam. You had to take a PSAT or something like that. And then I got a letter from Milton Academy one day saying, we're pleased to admit you, and here's the tuition, and here's the scholarship. Here's the tuition and the scholarship. And this is the day we expect you to show up. And that was it. I showed up at Milton Academy the night before classes began. I was 14 years old. I came by myself. I had never seen any place like it before. And I've told this story before about how they had a dress code in those days.
The other students wore blazers, and you had a new windbreaker.
I did, because a jacket on the south side of Chicago is a windbreaker. So when they said jackets and ties for classes, my grandparents got me a brand new windbreaker. I've figured it out, though, as you see.
They were well-traveled. They were more well-read in the classics you wrote. You were intimidated early on.
Oh, yeah. I had, through doing, really, as I look back on it, not much homework. I had consistently been the good kid, the studious kid, the well-performing kid in school up till then. I got my first C at Milton. I think it was a C. It might have been worse.
You remember it as a C.
I remember it as a C. I told you I'm an optimistic guy.
You write about feeling as though you were living between two worlds for a time, your old world and your new world, and that neither could possibly understand each other. At what point do you think you became comfortable in your own skin and stopped feeling like you were stuck between places that you didn't really belong, and that purpose, which you write about, was more important than belonging?
Yes. Well, it wasn't while there, although I think it started there. You know, I was in Washington earlier today, and at an event around the book, a young woman who is a student in a similar setting asked what it was like to try to maintain friendships from the old neighborhood when she was living in this new world at her own boarding school. And I told her the story, which I write about in the book, of coming home on the first visit back at Christmas vacation. I'd been away for 3 months at that point. And my grandparents and my sister were in the apartment and all excited and so on, and everybody talking at once. And my sister inserted herself. Rhonda, are you here? Where is she? She was going to come tonight. She's so sick of me telling this story. My sister said, "Ooh, he talks like a white boy." I was devastated. And my grandmother shot back, "He speaks like an educated boy," and sort of saved the day. But as you see, I've been carrying that around for the longest time. I think what I realized about that experience, and as I was saying to the young woman who asked me the question, is that you feel like that each of these worlds requires you to reject the other world as the price of acceptance in that world. And that for me, what I had to figure out is what it meant to be authentically me, and to carry that consistently to whatever setting I wanted to be in. And that was the only way to navigate, because I knew then, even at Milton, that I wanted to live in the whole world. I wanted to be and experience different kinds of settings, and I can tell you about why I wanted that. And I had to figure out how to, be at ease and comfortable and complete in these different settings. And I think, so what I was saying to the young woman who asked me the question, she said, "Well, what about, maintaining your friends?" I said, "You know what, figure out who you are. And the people who love you will love you for that, and the ones who don't are not your friends." And I do think, you have to get there in order to navigate.
Your father wasn't crazy about the idea of you going to Milton Academy. He said he feared it would make you not black enough. You called race at Milton its own complex dynamic. You were outnumbered by white people. Said you couldn't count the number of times that you listened to a dissertation on black poverty only to be asked by a parent of a student if he or she could touch your hair. Incredibly awkward.
Yeah.
You wrote...
That's why I cut it off.
You sure that's the reason?
It has a lot more to do with my current employment.
I speak from some experience. You wrote, "The larger problem is how Milton Academy then interpreted racial integration." Why don't you explain that?
Well, I believe in integration. I believe in living an integrated life. I think it has made my life and our family's lives much richer and more interesting. But I think that at the time at Milton, and maybe at many institutions like it, integration meant you coming from some other place and becoming entirely a part of that place and leaving everything behind, not contributing, just assimilating. And I understand that, but it's the point I was making earlier about how you feel like you are having to, that the price of acceptance is rejecting your past and who you are, and that part of what has contributed to making you who you are. And so I worked that out. I had some wonderful adults at Milton who helped with that during the time I was there.
A.O. Smith?
A.O. Smith, who was an extraordinary English teacher of mine, I write about in the book, and June Elam, who was the rare middle-class black mother resident in Milton whose kids went to Milton at the time.
I want to make sure that we don't leave the wrong impression. You loved your time at Milton.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, since you're mentoring kids now, you appreciate the fact of being able to pass that on.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let me move on here and ask about your family and Diane. You write early on that my grandparents and my mother were physically and emotionally distant. Midway through the book, you point out that when a fellow Harvard student found out your father, Pat, was a jazz great, you said, yeah, but he's a jerk. He left when you were 4. You ran after him. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was 4 years old, that was when my parents split. My father came home. We lived in a basement apartment on the south side, and my father came home, and I write about the tension that you could tell was in the apartment before he came. My sister and mother and I were there, and not long after he came in, they just went at it. They had a huge argument, and my mother slumped in a chair in tears, and he stormed out of the apartment, and I remember running down the street after him, and him saying, "Go home, go home, go home." And about a block down, he just lost his patience, and he turned around and he slapped me, and I fell. And I remember burning my palms on the sidewalk. I think every kid who's ever grown up in the city knows what that feels like. And it was from that position that I watched him walk away, and I didn't see or hear from him for a couple years after that. So I didn't know that was the moment of their separation. I didn't know the reason for their separation for years. Till I was a senior in high school and talked to my grandmother about it, and then my mother. My mother hoped for a reconciliation, not something, Bob, I knew at the time, but there were letters from my mother to my father in his effects when he died, and letters from him to her in her effects when she died. And when you put them together, it's really an incredibly poignant insight into their own difficult relationship. He moved to New York and with his band, the Sun Ra Orchestra, and I saw more of him when I came to Milton because we were closer to physically. But as you said earlier, he was very disapproving of Milton, and we had all that dynamic. But we eventually reconciled, and there's a story I write about in the book which was I think a particularly meaningful milestone in that when I was 25.
Let me ask you this about your dad. It did take you a long time for the two of you to get back together, and we've talked about that on the radio in the past. I read in the book that eventually he grew very close to your two girls.
Yes.
You wrote that he showered on them the gentleness and attention that I so craved as a kid. Some people, other people, perhaps may have been a little angry at that, or maybe even jealous of their own daughters at that point, that they were getting the attention that you didn't get when you were a child. But I gather that you got great satisfaction out of watching your father and your daughters together.
Absolutely. Oh, sure. I mean, it's first of all, I think over the years, before the girls were born, I began to realize how much he wished we had that kind of time together as kids. I mean, he was totally dedicated to his music and not to his family, and I think he felt bad about that. And also, you know, you carry some stuff like that around, anger around, it just eats away at you. So one of the lessons I try to write about is forgiveness. And because like it or not, particularly with your parents, you save a place. You know, and you can fill that with resentment and anger, or you can fill it with forgiveness and move on. And with the forgiveness, it's a predicate, I think, for moving forward. I guess the other thing I'd say is I've been very blessed to have had a lot of fathers. My grandfather, A.O. Smith, other men who have paid attention to me and helped to show me how to be a man and how to be a father.
And you said, and I say this, with a father-in-law who is a retired school principal, and a mother-in-law who's a retired teacher, and a wife who's a special ed teacher, a high school special ed teacher. So I asked this question with a little bit of pride, sort of. You said that teachers in your life filled a void that was left kind of vacant by your home life.
Absolutely. My mother and grandparents loved me, but they were not demonstrative. They were not physical. They didn't say it quite. You knew it, but it just wasn't like that. My teachers, oh my God, my teachers were just extraordinary, and I got a lot of the feedback from teachers that I think I craved at home. That my sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Quaintance, whom I write about in the book, you know, you have to imagine the scene where there are 30 or 40 of us in the classroom, and we're a mess, right? We are a mess. Our households are a mess. The neighborhood is a mess. She taught us to count and say the greetings in German. She took us to the first opera I'd ever seen. I didn't know what they were singing about. I still don't know what they're singing about, but I loved it then, and I love it now. She took us, there was a new movie out at the time called The Sound of Music, and she took us to The Sound of Music, and she used it to teach us about the rise of the Nazis and the Second World War. She's the first person who helped me imagine what it would be like to be a citizen of the world, and made us feel like it was completely within our reach. I mean, it's an incredible gift. She was present when I graduated from college and law school. She was present when I was married. She was present when I was sworn in as head of the Civil Rights Division in the Justice Department. She would have been at the inauguration if she were still living. My third grade teacher was at the inauguration. My seventh grade teacher, the one who introduced me to ABC, I've stayed in touch with. A.O. Smith, who has also passed away, was my ninth grade teacher at Milton, English teacher. Incredible character who we lost a few years ago, but I think about him every single day.
Big picture, how did that entire dynamic, the family dynamic, the education dynamic, your childhood dynamic, inform and shape your relationship with your immediate family?
Well, I am very, poor kids, I'm very demonstrative with them. I want them to have absolutely not one iota of doubt that they are loved and supported by me. I think they know that. I know they know that. I think Diane, who is the most courageous and the smartest person I know, also knows she can count on me. We've been married 27 years now, I think, and known each other 29 years. And I write about how we got to know each other in this book, too.
Well, I don't want to give it all away, but you write, and the reason I don't is because it's a great reason to pick up the book and read it. I don't want to give it all away, but you write very intimately, and I don't mean that in a Hollywood way, but with a disarming candor about how you found, courted, and grew to love and respect Diane. And I'm wondering, was it easy or difficult to write so openly about that relationship?
Well, it would have been difficult if I hadn't had permission. I still got to go home, right? I mean, no, but we talked about it. It's some of the stories, like how we met at a Halloween party in Los Angeles, are stories lots of our friends know we've talked about. This was a costume party which was organized so that we could meet. Diane knew this. I did not. And I was invited by some people. I was out there clerking for a year, and she was practicing law at that point, and I was asked to come in costume, and I came in a caftan I brought back from Nigeria, and I had a spear and no shoes, and my face all painted, and I strode into the party, and I was the only one they had invited to come in costume. Diane wore a black silk pantsuit and pearls, as I recall. But I don't know if it was the fact that I was armed or what, but and then, I did not know that she was married at the time. I just want to let that sink in. Diane was about to separate for the third and final time from a actually quite abusive first marriage, and her friend, her very best friend out there, and I had met, and that friend had decided that we were right for each other, in fact made for each other, and that time was short because I was going to be in Los Angeles only for a year, and so set up the party. But I write about that abuse in Diane's life, and she's talked about it, by the way, publicly, which has saved a lot of lives in Massachusetts.
I think the part of the book that has gotten the most headlines, as we saw a couple of months ago when parts of the book leaked out, was about how only weeks into your first term, in the middle of at that time, a constant stream of negative news stories, the stress built up, and Diane was hospitalized briefly at McLean's Hospital in Belmont for rest, working with a therapist and recovery. It was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And you write about how you considered resigning. The two of you talked about whether you should resign.
We did. It was scary for both of us, and for different reasons. I think scary for Diane because when you are in that kind of depression, she said, and the doctor said, you feel like you will never get better. And so, and that's an awful place to be, and for me to imagine. And it was a terrible time for me because I love the job, and I'm honored to do it. But it's an episode in my life. She is my life.
Right.
So there were real questions about whether this made sense. We, I think, both had the presence of mind to talk about it, but not try to make that decision in the middle of all that. And I'm so glad that I think, and she would say the same, that we decided to hang in. We worked real hard, to get to that place. And as I write in the book, I paid a whole lot of attention to the transition and the budget and trying to figure out how to be a governor, not having been in elective office before, and there were an awful lot of demands on her that I wasn't paying any attention to, and the connection really, the reason excuse me, Bob, just to connect it up, she was particularly despairing because the sense of not having control of her own life that she was feeling in the early days of the first administration was what she remembered feeling when she was in the last days of her marriage, of her first marriage. That sense of having someone else completely in control of your own actions and destiny. So it was really tough.
How did you feel at that moment, given all that she'd been through, given your early life, right there under the microphone? There must have been incredible guilt.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I felt guilty, I know Diane's a very private person. She's so good on the public stuff. She's so good. If during the first campaign when she was out there, I would always say to people, they'd see us both at an appearance and they say, well, why that guy? How come How come we can't have her? What she's figured out, of course, is how to do as much of the First Lady stuff as she can and wants to, and not to feel so bad about saying no to all the rest of it. But yeah, I felt terribly guilty, and I think that's why we were having the kinds of conversations we were at the time about whether we should stick with this.
I want to ask about your impressions about the media, because you write about it a little bit.
Sorry, our time is up.
You write, and I'm paraphrasing, for the first several days we placed a premium on secrecy. You sneaked in and out of the hospital. Even your staff didn't know for a few days. And you wrote, the doctors felt the meanness of the media would not be useful in terms of helping Diane get better. Did you share that view of the media then as being mean? And are we still today?
You're a sweetheart. Come on.
Yeah.
No, really, when I use the term meanness, that wasn't mine, that was the doctor's.
That was the doctor's.
Yeah,
so I asked if you shared that.
No, I did not. Look, I think I understand better the job the media has to do, and I don't have to like it every day. I mean, come on, I don't have to like it, but I do have to understand it, and I have to work with the media if we're going to be successful in helping to inform people about what it is we're trying to do and why. The why takes longer, right, than what we're trying to do, and if you don't have a relationship with the media, then they won't listen to the why. They'll just want to hear about the what and pepper you with questions about that. The issue the doctors raised, Bob, was around the stigma of depression, and they worried that the reaction to Diane's illness would make her illness worse, would make it harder for her to get better. In fact, I will say, and I think I mentioned this in the book, I hope I did, the media was incredibly respectful of her and us in that period. And the outpouring from the public was incredible. I mean, just thousands. I brought bags of messages, letters, emails, prayers, words of encouragement. And Diane continues to get them. And as she talks about issues of domestic abuse or her own experience with depression, she still gets those kinds of that kind of feedback that she has saved lives. And I'm not exaggerating. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Couple more questions, and we'll take a few questions from the audience here. Let me back up a little bit. Campaigns can be crazy from the outside, from our perspective, and from the candidates as well. You write about how you had to push back against news stories or stories that didn't quite make the news because they were not true, not true. Things such as defaulting on your mortgage or using cocaine, crazy stories.
Can you just clarify what you just said? Because none of that is true,
well,
by the way.
Which is why I said it the way I said it.
Yeah.
They did not make it into the news
right.
because they were not news stories.
Right.
They were not true. But you write about it as if you were aghast that rumors like that could almost become fact in the fishbowl of a campaign. Were you naive?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been in public life before, but nothing like that. I mean, you know where the cocaine thing came from? I used to work at the Coca-Cola Company. Someone heard I was involved with Coke, and that turned into a reporter saying, "We've got a tip that you have a cocaine problem." I mean, huh? Now, I can understand the logic of it, but you know, when you're there on the receiving end of this stuff, you think, "Come on." And then some things get planted really purposely. You know this, Bob.
Well, I've read about it.
No. But what I mean, so there are differences in the level of integrity in any profession, and sometimes things get reported that are rumors, and sometimes the rumors are verified first, and if they're verified and false, then they don't get reported. But dealing with that, how nasty it was, how intentional some of that guerrilla warfare is among campaigns. That's hard. That was tough.
At what point in the process did you come to believe, did you come to say to yourself, you know, this is going to work, I'm going to be governor?
Well, you know, Diane is the, I don't think I put this in the book, but when we talked in this early spring, I think it was, of 2005, about whether we were really going to do this, Diane said to me, you know, if you do this, you're going to win. And she was very apprehensive about doing it, as I said, because she was such a private person. I knew we had to work real hard. I sensed, as I said at the outset, that there was something that other people, as citizens, were feeling, as I was feeling as a citizen. But I don't think I knew it was a done deal until, and I was confident it was a done deal until the race was called shortly after the polls closed, and certainly the same thing the last time around, because I just don't, you just don't take that sort of thing for granted.
I want to ask about your future. You write in the book that a congressman friend of yours once said to you in relation to your political savvy, quote, "I love you, but I wish you were more of an SOB sometimes." On The Daily Show with Jon Stewart a couple of days ago, Stewart jokingly asked you if you'd ever consider giving up your conviction and idealism to enter national politics. Is the expectation that you have to give up something of yourself to be really, truly effective? Have you ever felt that pull? And do you think that you've been able to stay true to yourself all this time?
Well, first of all, of course I've felt that pull. But that's not a pull that is unique to elective office or to public life. That's a pull that people feel in their, going to work in the bakery or whatever it is. There are all kinds of opportunities where you are faced with choices. And I have never taken a job or done a job where I felt I needed to leave my conscience at the door. And one of the reasons why I feel confident in saying that is because I feel pretty versatile. I think I've got options. So if I've told you this before, Bob, and you usually roll your eyes when I tell you. But one of the great things about not being in politics as a career is that I can do this job without thinking about my career. I can think about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and what we're trying to leave. So you have to know that in some of the budget choices we've had to make, to invest here and not there, or to cut here in order to invest there, something that was worthy in order to invest more in education, for example, that those are really hard decisions. It's not that we think that the other choice is or other program is bad. That's hard. And I don't, when folks come and they sit in the waiting room there in the governor's office, there's a back door in. I don't take the back door. I go in. I listen to the complaints or the advice or what have you. I sit with people. They tell me their stories. Sometimes I'm able to respond to that. Sometimes I'm not. But I think that's about being present in the job. And I think it is important to me that people know I struggle with some of these decisions because they are complicated and they are real people, not just line items.
You've said many times now that your second term is your last term as governor and that you will not challenge Senator Scott Brown for the Senate in 2012. Although I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that there are a bunch of people in this room who yearn for you to do so, and probably more so right now than they did an hour and 20 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
So their question is that hard and fast?
Yeah, I thank you. Thank you. But no, that's not for me. Look, there's going to be, there are already strong Democrats who are either in or thinking about coming in. I think there are, this is not a race that Senator Brown or anyone else should take for granted. And I'm fully confident there will be a challenger, and I appreciate the encouragement of those of you who applauded, and I've taken the names of those of you who did not. But that's not for me.
So, last question before I go to audience questions. When someone then comes up to you and reads to you your slightly rewritten words from page 208, and they come to you and they say, given the acknowledged disillusionment of so many citizens that we talked about earlier, I urge you to return to the political process and renew your belief that you can make a difference. How does Deval Patrick respond to Deval Patrick?
Well, I think, did I write that? I think what I am more likely to say to the person who asked me that question is, why not you? I mean, one of the things that happens in our political environment is that we look into this is not a dig on people who are in politics, but we tend to look to the existing politicians for our candidates. There are some fabulous candidates out there, but it's time we all step up. I appreciate I look out and I see so many people who are involved in campaigns and so on, so helpful, and I'm grateful. And some of you hadn't been involved before, and that's terrific. I met a guy today in Washington who is from Springfield. He told me his mother, he's about my age, he told me his mother has lived in Massachusetts for almost all of her 70-some-odd years and had never voted, had never voted and wasn't registered. And the first time she ever registered to vote was in the primary in 2006 when I ran the first time so she could cast a vote for me. And she put a lawn sign out as well. I love that. And I think the next challenge I want to put to people is, how about you? You're asking me the question, you go run. How do we help you build a grassroots movement? How do we help you offer that kind of leadership? How do we help you find your voice and say what you think you can contribute, if that's the way you want to contribute? And the hard part of this, Bob, is that we as a Commonwealth and as a country have done so much to make the experience of serving so unpleasant on so many levels that it scares a lot of good people off. It doesn't have to be that way, by the way. It doesn't have to be that way. But I think that there are more people than sometimes we credit who are ready to serve, just need a little encouragement to do so, and people who are going to stick with them even when it's not going so well.
Okay. A few questions from the audience. You've attended numerous funerals for fallen service members and consoled their family members. What goes through your mind at the sheer number of military funerals you found yourself attending? And I would add to that, I know because we've talked about this, that you go to these events as anonymously as possible. And not completely anonymous, of course, but you don't make a big public thing about your presence there. So answer this question and explain why.
So actually, I write about this in the book. The first loss we had after I became governor, my staff said you should go to the funeral, and I didn't want to go because I didn't want to be misunderstood. I didn't want people to think you were showing up to draw attention to the governor. And my staff said, no, it's important you go. And I said, well, I don't want to speak. And if I can go and just be a fellow mourner, just comfort the family, I will do that. it's some of the best advice I got that I've taken. I've gone to everyone or almost everyone. And I think the thing that goes through my mind, again, a little like consoling the parents who have lost their children to gun violence, there's really nothing you can say, but your presence turns out to be more meaningful than I thought. I've been asked to speak from time to time. I always decline. Probably the thing that strikes me most of all is the youth. You have to imagine these scenes because, frequently we are burying someone who is 18, 19, 20 years old. Their pals are there, and you can tell that this is their first close experience with death. Every once in a while there is a mother holding a child that the soldier has not even seen, not even touched. And the disbelief, and yet the pride of sacrifice is a very humbling and profound thing. And I must say that this is a field of the question, and there are a couple parents here who I just want to. I love you guys, and thank you that you show up as often as you do. One of the things that I take away from this experience, and I go back into the hurly-burly of the daily life, and the work. It's extraordinary what we are asking in sacrifice of these mostly young people, and yet how unwilling we are to ask sacrifice of each other. I met a guy. I went to Iraq and Afghanistan last summer. And I had some time with the National Guard, Massachusetts National Guard soldiers we were able to rendezvous with. Incredible what they do. They put on like 30 pounds of body armor and a 15-pound helmet and at least it felt that way to me, and a rucksack that's a bunch of other pounds, and they get in this armored vehicle which is all sealed up and is about 110 degrees inside, and they do that all day long. Sweat like you wouldn't believe, and they get up and do it again the next day. And this one guy, one of the things I would say to people is thank you for your sacrifice. And this one young man said to me, he said, the only people sacrificing, he said, are those of us over here. He said, at home, they don't even know there's a war going on. And I said, well, say more about that. And he was very specific about policy and rhetoric, and he said, as wonderful people show up with the flags and all that stuff. He said, but ask them to pay for this war? He said, they won't do that. You carry that with you.
Tough question from a teacher. When you first ran, many dedicated teachers were hopeful about reform that included teacher involvement and many teachers' perspectives. I am one of many teachers who are finding it hard not to feel alienated now. How do you plan to help transform educational debate into a place where all opinions feel valued?
What a great question, because one of the things, do you mind if I ask whose question it was? There's a teacher. So let me just say that where do you teach, by the way? In Hyde Park? So, hey, how are you? So teachers, one of the things you take away from a lot of the reporting on, and this isn't a dig at the media. This is, I think this is a fair observation. One of the things I take away from a lot of the reporting on education reform, and I know a lot of teachers are feeling this way, is that teachers are the problem. Teachers are not the problem. Poverty is the problem. Poverty is the problem. And and I will say, in all the different things that people are trying out there today, charter schools and what have you, there's no one solution, as I see it. There's no one solution. We got to try a bunch of different things and meet the kids where they are. And the import of the Achievement Gap bill, where teachers, by the way, were at the table in helping us develop the bill. They didn't like everything about it. right? But they were there and consulted and a part of it. One of the objectives, really the central objective of the Achievement Gap Bill, is to give the space and the support for the teachers to try something. Try something. And the solution is not going to be the same in every school. The teacher and the parents and the other educational professionals in the school are more likely to have a sense of what is involved there than somebody sitting in my office, for example. So let me just thank you for the question because of the opportunity it gives me to ask everyone here to thank you for the service that you give to those young people every day. Hang in.
I'm really impressed with the wonderful speeches you gave during your campaign, Change and Hope. Then Obama started saying the same thing in his speeches. Did he copy you, and was your campaign the test ground?
Well, whose question was that? Who asked that question? You did? Not exactly. I spent some time with David Plouffe today in the White House, and I talked to the president yesterday after the speech he gave yesterday afternoon on the deficit plan. We talk. We don't talk as much as you all think we talk, but we talk from time to time, and I think that we feel that in 2004, when he was running for Senate, I think I have the dates right, there are a lot of things about what he was trying to do and the way he was trying to do it that excited me that we used in 2006. And then he used some of those same terms and tactics, at our invitation, at my specific invitation, in 2008. We built off of particularly some of the use of the social media and so forth. They used a lot of stuff we did in 2006 when they ran the national campaign in 2008, turbocharged, and then we took some of those learnings again in 2010. I think there is a lot in. We're not the same person, but there is a lot aligned about our philosophy of politics. And a lot aligned around policy. Not the same, but a lot. That turns out, I think, to be good for Massachusetts right now. It has benefited the people of Massachusetts enormously in very, very practical ways. But I will say this. You remember all the flap when the president was running about plagiarizing the just words riff? You remember that? And so when we had a dinner together on Martha's Vineyard in 2006, Senator Obama, then Senator Obama, and Michelle and Valerie Jarrett and Diana and me. And I said to him then, I said I have 3 pieces of advice, and I had them all written on a little scrap piece of paper, and I think I write about these in the book. And one of the pieces of advice for him this was actually 2007. And I said, one of the pieces of advice is this: they're gonna come at you and say it's just words, you can give a great speech. I said they came at me the same way. Here's what I used and why I used it, and use it if you see a need. And he did, and that then started this whole thing. And it was so interesting because I gave my talk about just words. Actually, I'm going to stop there. Never mind. I'm going to stop there.
You write a little bit. Just a couple more questions. Do I have a little bit more time? Okay. You write in the book that since we're on the subject, that in part Mr. Obama won the first campaign because people wanted to be inspired. They wanted leadership. Yet polls now indicate that for many people, this president is no longer inspiring people, and many people don't feel as though he's lived up to the leadership promise. The overarching theme in your book is that hope and idealism have the power to transform. Does this president still have that power, or has he lost it?
First, yes, unambiguously. And secondly, hope and idealism are the only things that have ever made positive change in the world. So it's not an original idea. My point is just to reaffirm the importance of them. What this president will benefit from is the campaign. Because the opportunity, and I found this in my own experience, the opportunity to connect what we've been doing into a narrative for people, and the attention that is given to a campaign as distinct from the day-to-day governing was helpful. Exhausting, but helpful. And it'll be great for this president as well. And I think yesterday, which was not about the campaign, but was about his ability to, the president's speech yesterday, where he really started talking again beyond policy, but about what kind of country we want to live in. That's where he needs to be. That's, I think, frankly, where all of us want to be. That's the kind of conversation we are hungry for in this country, and I think he is uniquely capable of leading it.
Will he win? What's he need to do?
Well, I'm not a pundit. You got to ask he has to get more votes than the others. That's what he has to do. But and I
let me write that down.
I think he will.
I think we're kind of getting the high sign. So, Governor Patrick, I very much want to thank you for allowing me to question you tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.